When Samsung recently announced their latest lineup of Galaxy Book Pro and Galaxy Book Pro 360 models, it was the clamshell style 15-inch Pro model that really jumped out at me. And that's because it weighs a staggeringly light 1,050 grams. But you see, that's where my worries began. You see, I've had poor experiences using thin and light laptops which prioritize lightness above all else. When I tested the LG Gram 14 just a few months ago, the current kind of king of the ultralight thin and light space, I found that the screen was wobbly, it was glossy, the CPU horribly underperformed, and its build quality just didn't feel like it matched the pretty high price point that they were charging. So it stands to reason with this 15-inch model weighing only 50 grams more and having exactly the same CPU that I'm gonna have all the same problems all over again. Well, no, actually, that couldn't be further from the truth. And this might actually be my new favorite, the new king of ultralight thin and light laptops. So we've mentioned the weight already, and it has to be held to truly believe just how incredibly light it is. But the other really good selling point that Samsung is shipping with this is the AMOLED display. It kind of has to be seen to believe it, and I don't think the camera will really pick up on it once it's gone through encoding and then gone through YouTube's encoding. But the blacks and whites are so crisp and so lovely. As far as laptops go, it's as vibrant as any other laptop display I've used and improves anything from casual browsing to playing games and watching movies. Anybody who considers themselves a bit of a creative cat will really enjoy the display as well. Samsung includes a number of pre-configured color profiles as well. It's got the native vivid mode, an sRGB mode, an Adobe color accurate mode, and DCI-P3 color mode as well. The bezels are also super thin and unobtrusive on the sides and the top. A little bit chunky at the bottom though, and that's because this is a 16:9 rather than a 16:10 aspect ratio. Returning subscribers know how much I love a 16:10 aspect ratio, and so I'm really disappointed to not see that here, particularly as the LG Gram does have it, and so that's definitely a tick for the Gram over the Galaxy Book Pro. On the topic of subscribers, if you're enjoying today's content, guys, remember at the end of the video to hit that subscribe button for me and give the like button a tickle. And while this AMOLED display has really vibrant colors, its brightness is definitely on the disappointing side, coming in at around 370 nits of peak brightness. Now, most other premium price laptops we're seeing as a minimum will hit 400, and some like the Dell XPS 13 will push all the way to 500 as well. So if you're working in brightly lit conditions, you might find you struggle a little bit with this device. But this AMOLED display is so crisp, those blacks and whites so clean, that actually from time to time to the trained eye you can notice a little bit of pixel stepping. That's because this is a 1080p display. There's no option for a Quad HD or 4K display type either. That's probably the right decision from Samsung though, because including either of those would have had a massive effect on battery life, and battery life on this is absolutely brilliant. I got about 8.5, 9 hours out of this on a single charge. That's doing reasonably low intensity work on a Citrix remote virtual desktop as part of my day job before I then had to plug this thing back into the wall. On the subject of plugging it back into the wall, it's got a 45-watt charging brick, which is small and unobtrusive, really light, easy to throw in your bag and get out on the road. The charging method is through USB-C, and on the subject of ports, we've got an absolutely brilliant selection on this Galaxy Book Pro. So we have ourselves, the USB-C Thunderbolt 4 enabled port though, which means if you've got dual 4K monitors or a single 8K monitor, you'll have no trouble daisy chaining this all through the single port. We've got a regular USB-C port as well, a full-size HDMI port, so even if you don't want to carry dongles around to make the most of that Thunderbolt connectivity, you'll easily be able to hook this up to an external display wherever you are on the road. And on the right side of the device, we have a headphone jack. Contrary or counter to some of its competitors in the form of the Dell XPS range and the MacBook Air, it is possible to fit a USB Type A port in a device this thin, which is really good to see. And we've also got a micro SD card reader as well. A little disappointing it's not a full-size SD card reader, particularly given how color accurate and how useful this display will be for creative professionals, but it's far from the end of the world. Ultimately, to get this thing as light as it is, there has to be a degree of sacrifice in terms of build quality. Unlike other premium competitors that add a little bit more weight, this isn't a full aluminium chassis, it's an aluminium magnesium alloy, which means it does get it pretty thin whilst maintaining some degree of rigidity as well. And while the aluminium and magnesium chassis does have a degree of flex to it, which is essential in order to get this thing as light as it is, it doesn't directly impede upon the typing experience, which sometimes can feel a little bit bouncy with these thin and light laptops. No evidence of that here whatsoever. I got up to speed on it immediately. Really comfortable typing experience, nice soft click sound to it as well. And as this is a 15-inch device, they've managed to squeeze in, albeit a slightly condensed, full-size number pad as well. In the top right of the keyboard, we have the power icon, which doubles up as a fingerprint sensor as well. It's got a cached mode, which means when you turn this thing on from a cold start, it'll remember your fingerprint all the way through to the Windows Hello login screen and pull you straight through into Windows 10 without you having to tap it again, which is just a really nice touch. The trackpad is absolutely gargantuan for a 15-inch laptop, really nice and easy to use, comfortable experience, full array of Windows precision gestures as well, albeit if you're a little bit sound sensitive, you might find that the down click is just a little bit snappy. Speakers are okay, they're nice and clear and crisp, albeit they are downward facing, so I think a little bit of sound does get lost. There's also not a huge amount of bass or treble. It's far from the worst, equally far from the best. Let's take a quick listen. This is the 720p webcam, which is unsurprisingly pretty poor, as most 720p webcams are. A little bit grainy, a little bit overexposed. On the plus point though, the microphone in here isn't entirely awful. Far from great, but you know, silver linings. Now Samsung have actually packaged in some pretty useful software into the Galaxy Book Pro by default. So firstly, we've got their quick share functionality, which is like AirDrop in terms of the Apple ecosystem, except it applies to Samsung Galaxy-based devices to allow easy sharing of content between devices or across multiple devices if you so choose as well. We also mentioned earlier on the display configuration, which Samsung has pre-packaged. We have a similar sort of functionality for performance modes as well, including a fanless mode, which will disable the fans. And while there's a little bit of a health warning to say that the device may run a little bit hot, that will allow you to at least get MacBook Air sort of user experience, albeit you won't get anywhere near MacBook Air levels of performance. So on the subject of performance and specifications, the entry-level model costs about £1,200, comes with an Intel i5 processor, 8GB of RAM. This version is the spec'd up one, it's £1,450 with an Intel i7 1165G7, so not quite the top of their Ultrabook notebook line of processors, and it has 16GB of RAM as well. Regardless of the model, you get 512GB of storage. And as we can see in Cinebench, we don't get anywhere near the MacBook Air in terms of its levels of performance. Even the more powerful 1185 G7 Intel processors won't manage to achieve that. But most importantly, it was the pick of the bunch in terms of the other 1165 G7 processors that I've used, absolutely trouncing the LG Gram 14 and Cinebench R23, albeit there's not really much to choose between them in Geekbench. That SSD may be the same size regardless of the model you're going to choose, but they definitely cheaped out in terms of its performance. Meanwhile, in the Geekbench graphics test, the Intel Iris Xe graphics chip performed largely in line with all the other 11th gen Intel chipsets I've tested. In more practical graphics tests though, it nailed a reasonably respectable score, 1758 in 3D Mark Time Spy. The Intel Iris Xe graphics you get with 11th gen Intel processors are absolutely brilliant. I mean, they're nowhere near a dedicated discrete graphics card, but they're the best chipset graphics available today. Playing Overwatch with the settings set to low, I benchmarked this thing managing to achieve average frame rates of around 66 frames per second, albeit that will be capped to the 60 Hz refresh rate of this display, with the 1% lows getting around the 33 frames per second mark. And when you're playing indie-like titles on this AMOLED display, you'll just find that your whole immersive experience is really, really improved. So in terms of my verdict about the Galaxy Book Pro 15-inch model, if you're in the market for the thinnest and lightest laptop you can get your hands on, just stop watching right now and go and buy it. It's crazy lightweight, the display is absolutely beautiful, and its performance out of this CPU will handle the vast majority of tasks that you'll throw at it. That being said, it's still far from perfect. I wish it had a 16:10 aspect ratio, I wish it had at least 400 nits of peak brightness, and it's important to remember that at this price point, albeit there'll be heavier devices, that there are other laptops that feel better built and perform better, like the outstanding MacBook Air. You can check my review of that out up there to see just how much of a game changer that M1 chip really is. And with all that being said and done, guys, if you enjoyed today's video, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe as always, go over to social media, all that good stuff, and I will see you in the next one.